Hi, this is The Greatest Story Ever Played. I'm Dan, and I'm joined by John and Ted from Do You Want to Continue? Welcome, guys. Why don't you introduce yourselves?
Hello, I'm John. Thank you for having us, Dan. This is pretty exciting. We're happy to be here and looking forward to talking about a game that was one of my favorites from the last few years.
Yes, and I am Ted from, as Dan said, the Do You Want to Continue podcast, and I am John's better half. And in this case, I am in agreement, and we are excited to come on the show and talk about this wonderful game.
Awesome. Yeah. And I guess also, actually, if people don't know about your guys' podcast, do you have a little bit you'd want to tell them about / where they could find you?
Sure. All right, John, I'll tell them what we're about, and you can tell them where to find us.
I think it should be the opposite.
All right, John, tell them what we're about, and I might argue with you.
We are also a video game podcast. I guess we do reviews, sort of, kind of. We just kind of sit down and talk about games. I've never thought about it really if I would call us reviewers or not. We occasionally grade a game, but yeah, no, we're two friends like to sit down and talk about games that we've played, and amongst our friends, we're the few that play a fair amount of video games.
I prefer to think of myself as an analyst, like sports. You know, I'm looking at the stats, I'm looking at the scores, I'm looking at people's points. The general kind of conceit of our show, in as much as we have one, and I think we've kind of shied away from this out of respect to our friendship, is we initially were assigning each other games because I'm a much more, let's say, retro inclined person. This is Ted, and John is a much, I don't know, forgiving to the AAA space than me.
I like my 3D games.
You do like your 3D open world games. So we sort of assign each other games to do, although we've wavered a bit on that, just not to murder each other. So we do deep dives, we try to analyze, we try to break apart, you know, the triangle of, theme, plotting, gameplay, mechanics, etc.
Yeah, better said than I did.
That's why I swooped in.
Yeah.
and the most important part, you can find us at Do You Want to Continue on any of the pod catchers of your choice.
Awesome. Yeah. If you haven't listened to their show, highly recommend it. As time's gone on, there's a chunk of games that we've both overlapped on, which is cool. I love hearing what they've had to say on games because they'll have takes that are different and not things I would have thought of. So highly recommend checking their show out.
Takes for days.
Yeah.
But that's very sweet. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
This is one we look forward to talking about actually together.
Yeah. No, yeah. I guess that leads us to really what we're all here to talk about is Return of the Obra Dinn, which is an awesome game. Before we get into it, I've got a description for us I'll read. It says, in 1802, the merchant ship the Obra Dinn set out from London for the Orient with over 200 tons of trade goods. 6 months later, it had not met at its rendezvous point in Cape of Good Hope and was declared lost at sea. Early this morning, October 14th, 1807, the Obra Dinn drifted into Falmouth with damaged sails and no visible crew. As an insurance investigator for the East India Company's London office, dispatch immediately to Falmouth, find means to board the ship, and prepare assessment of the damages. So that's where we're walking into, I guess, for this game. And then also, this was developed by Lucas Pope under his 3909 LLC, who is mostly known for doing Papers, Please. Have you guys played Papers, Please? Have you had experience with Lucas Pope before this?
Yes, I played Papers, Please actually a little bit before I played this one, and I found it to be incredibly stressful.
I have not. But everything I've heard about it makes it seem that, yeah, like it's, I don't know, yeah, it's something that would be tough to maybe find the fun in. I don't know about the strategy, but it does seem like kind of like, oh, I get to play a bureaucratic nightmare.
Yeah. I thought I really liked it. I like Obra Dinn considerably more, just on like a theming and some of the general gameplay conceits. Like it just works and hits a lot of the things that really interest me. I listened to an interview with him recently where he's kind of reflecting on these games, and he regards Papers, Please as a greater success than this, which, like, if I ever meet the guy, I want to grab him by the shoulders and just shake him and just be like, Obra Dinn is a masterpiece.
That's wild. I'm surprised to hear that. I would think that he'd regard this as the bigger success as well.
He seems to be, hard on himself in a good way, you know?
Oh, always kind of wanting the next thing and like wanting to continue growing and making new things. Kind of.
Yeah, he was sort of, he was self-critical, but also, very pleased with his work as well, but making sure to sort of, yeah, like you said, push forward.
It sounds like kind of a perfectionist, which I think works, in terms of like there's so much little minutia and so many little details, and I won't get into the conceit of this game, but it has to kind of add all up to make sense, and you could have easily found yourself going down certain trails that didn't add up, and the logic I think here is sound.
And then never releasing your game. You know, he talked about how he keeps a developer's journal, like for his people who follow him, and it keeps him somewhat accountable to actually finishing things, because like he doesn't have to have a deadline. He's self-reliant.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think I'd read that this game, I think when he'd first started it, he thought it would release like in a year after Papers, Please. Like he thought he'd get done with it. And then as he went, it just became way bigger and came out like 4 years later instead, which I'm sure that, like you both mentioned, like he probably just went down that rabbit trail and was like, wait a minute, all right, I need to make this better. What else can I add to flesh this out? What else can I do to connect these things, or, any of that stuff?
Yeah, and just so admirable in that he was the hand of all of it. I mean, he got some help, like, in terms of players for the music, right, John?
Well, I don't even know. I know he, there's a fair amount of voice acting, and obviously he didn't do all the voices. Right. And I think I heard once that they say that really the only thing he really didn't do himself was the voice acting, and then the actual localizations, i.e. the translations in the other languages, which, makes sense.
But he apparently built a tool to help with the localization.
Really?
So, yeah, because he's like a coder first, which is interesting. He refers to himself as an engineer before a storyteller, which I thought was interesting.
But basically, yeah, this is a game which rare these days, more or less made by a single guy. That's very impressive. So yeah, the fact that it took him a lot longer than he initially anticipated, not that surprising in retrospect.
Like he composed the music.
Yeah.
And the music's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, incredible. I think that especially after Obra Dinn, like Papers, Please had me like, you're an interesting maker of games and I want to see what you do next. Obra Dinn has me on the like, anything he puts out, I'm going to buy at this point. Like he's won me over for sure.
Yeah, day one follow.
So did you play Papers, Please?
Yeah, I did. I played Papers, Please maybe, I don't know, a year and a half ago, something like that. And similar to Ted, my experience was this is pretty stressful. And kind of like, oh, how do I don't know, make this game work kind of thing, because you're basically put in an impossible scenario. And so after a while I was like, oh, how can I like break the game to see what happens? And
yeah,
it was fun. Like I thought it was cool, and it was unlike anything I've played before. And similarly, I would say that Return of Obra Dinn is not like any video game I've played before. This is a unique experience for me, which I feel like, I don't know, being like a person like both of you who podcast about games, like we've played a lot of games at this point that we've talked about over time, and to run into something that you're like, I've never done something like this, is pretty cool.
Yeah. Oh, big time.
Yeah, I almost feel like this is, I think I've said earlier to Ted, this is a game too that I think I don't want to say stretches the boundaries of what a video game can be, but it made me realize there's a lot of people in my life that I know who don't play video games, but I could see them getting into this game because it defies, like you say, a lot of the conventions. It's something unique. I mean, I think there are comparisons to, like I'll say, other kind of types of puzzles that exist out in the world, but you don't see it very often in video game, and it takes, a phrase that I've harped on in the past. If you like deductive reasoning, mysteries, and solving things, whether it's a Sudoku or a crossword, I could see that same type of, you get that same type of enjoyment here with this game.
Yeah, and for me, with what you're saying, John, the deductive reasoning, it's so like masterful and subtle. And like, I'm someone who harps on, I really, really hate it when games totally guide my hands. And I run into this with a lot of like modern games where I feel like there's hands on my shoulders and they're pushing me in a direction and telling me where I have to go. And this game kind of like, I'm a little like persnickety about that, and it bothers me, but this one gives me just the right amount of like information and presents me the mechanics and then just lets me go and lets me sort of solve these detective cases in this story. And that to me was one where I'm like, okay, we're hitting that just correct zone, and that's giving me like the happy feels. And if I'm being honest, I was a PC kid, so also the visualizations in this game like are triggering something in my deep brain from my youth. And just reminding me of like sitting in the back of my parents' house just like playing games and trying to navigate the DOS prompt, to fire up like games.
That was cool too, how on the aesthetic like that you could change it to like from the Mac one, I think was the base one, but then it could be like, oh, Commodore 64 or these other ones of like, oh, you can make it that, make the game look entirely different, which I just played the Mac version, but I went and looked at each one just to see it. But I bet that it would even feel different if you played it the whole way through in one of the other looks, just because, the main one with the Mac version, it's, yellow, dark gray kind of color, and that's it. So it'd be interesting to see it play it those other ways too, I'm sure.
Were you a PC guy, a kid, Dan?
A little bit. I played like I don't know, like Civ 2 and stuff like that on my computer back in the day, or Age of Empires 2 or something.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what you guys are talking about too, I think that the first thing that caught my eye about this game was just the visuals, those 1-bit kind of trying to replicate the feeling, like you say, of those old PC graphics. But it's a weird thing where it is a fully 3D rendered environment that you're navigating. But like you say, the color and the fidelity is, a nostalgic representation of these old PC looks, which being the retro skeptic, as Ted alluded to earlier, was not something that necessarily like drew me in to be like, oh, I was worried like what this game was. I had no idea stepping in as an adventure game, and the old PC adventure games that Ted's had me play. Like I like a lot of things about them, but they're also sometimes can be like mind-bogglingly obscure.
Oh man, you're so ready for Planescape Torment to happen in our future. Well, we're talking about this, John, is like that lack of fidelity is so intentional and positive in this game, and that it allows you to mentally fill in the gaps of like these diorama situations, and then does give you enough to identify the humans.
Well, and like I said, it's a weird thing too, where even though it's a graphical style that was popularized in, let's say, the 80s, just being older, it makes the game feel more kind of ancient, like, oh, it's we're replicating an older visual style, even though the visual style is not obviously concurrent with the events that are taking place. It somehow still kind of makes it feel more appropriate because it's an age style, even if it's only 30 years old versus an age setting which is more like 200 years old. But there's some weird
an archaeological dig from the 80s is the ancient times, like the ancient civilization of the 80s. They were busting ghosts, John.
But yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I think something that's cool kind of coming into this too is just having a lot of love for this game, kind of all I guess from all of us coming in here, because it's nice, as I'm sure you've experienced too when you do games for your show. Sometimes it's like, all right, this is the game we're doing, but to be in a spot where you're like, this is a really cool game. I was thinking something also that similar to something John had mentioned is it feels again like something that's not outside of video games, like a board game, almost like a way more advanced Clue, or I have a Sherlock Holmes board game where like you're trying to solve it in less clues than Sherlock does, and it's really hard. And it felt very similar to this, where you're like, all right, who the hell are these people, and how do I reason my way there, and not feel like I'm phoning a friend or going to the guide too quickly or whatever, and like all of that, which is again pretty cool. Like I don't know, just not something that I don't know. I don't think games do that much, and I think could be super approachable. I guess you wouldn't have to have a very good PC to play this, probably. So that could also make it open to like someone who doesn't game. It's not like you have to go buy a PS5 to play this. It's like
it's definitely on the Switch. That's how I played it, and it ran fine.
Yeah. Well, and like you say, it's one of these things that I'm losing my train of thought here, but it just feels like something that it's trying to draw people in. It's not pushing you away, and the way the clues are laid out, without getting into too much detail already, it always feels very fair and logical. It's not trying to. There's not red herrings. It's not trying to get you to go down like waste time and going down the wrong path. And I think I learned early on to trust the game that hey, everything I need is here. Doesn't mean it's not hard to find. Some stuff is more obscure than others, but it's never trying to trick you or waste your time. It's just a matter of like being patient and looking around at everything.
And that is so fucking crucial that it does that. Like if you think that the captain's first mate is this person, it is. No one's going to be impersonating the captain's first mate. Like if it did that, I'd be out in a second, know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. Or if you hear them say John, there's not going to be a Johnny and a John, or anything like that. It's like if you hear a name, that's who it is. Or my brother or something. It's like, okay, who has that last name?
Did you think of John because you want to murder John?
He's the first murder on my
I
show.
think you just reveal a little bit more about yourself, Ted.
Yeah. John, why don't you have a drink of that glass in front of you?
Yeah. Just turn your head for a second. Yeah. What is that, Ted? I did baking soda.
Yeah, it's all right. Have you sound blanketed the walls in here? Yeah, it's for the podcast. Yeah.
That's great. So yeah, I guess that's I guess one more thing. I guess non-spoiler thoughts. If you don't know anything about this game, so you've heard us talk about what we like about it, some things about it. I think another thing that's just kind of interesting about this game, I didn't know what I was stepping into, but it almost feels like the Final Destination films are fun, but I wouldn't call them good. This feels sort of like a good version of that, where you're just seeing death take everyone out and how they got there, and it's pretty cool. It's a cool idea.
It's retro but heavily violent.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And like I say, and those graphics add an element where it doesn't totally devolve into the grotesque because of the graphical style. They can show some pretty gruesome things without you feeling totally disgusted by it. I mean, we all play video games, so I'm sure we've come across lots of gruesome stuff in video games anyway. Mm-hmm. But here, if I were to describe, some of the things you would see, they probably would be much worse in your imagination than they were as depicted in the game, even though it's full graphic and you're nothing's censored.
There is a head cleft in twain. That's pretty rendered.
Well, I'm just saying though, but for what it is, for what these things are, it's not as gruesome as, like, you just saying it puts a much more gruesome picture in my head than what you actually see depicted.
Yeah, that's true. I totally agree. That's all I really had for non-spoiler thoughts. Did you either of you have anything else you want to talk about before we kind of dive into the game and go into spoilers and everything?
Well, I put some notes on here, but I'm realizing that one of them is kind of spoilery, so I'll save some of these thoughts. But yeah, in general, I'm a big puzzle fan, so I just, once I figured out what this game was, because I really didn't know exactly, like I said, I thought it was going to be more of an adventure game. I knew the general setup, which was that, you're an insurance investigator sent to, investigate this ship. But I didn't really know what that means. And then when the game revealed what it was, how it was structured, and what the actual play and mechanics were, I was super excited and was immediately on board. And I finished this game in a matter of a few nights, just because it's one, like you said, where I didn't feel like it was a chore. I had to get it done for our podcast. I was actually excited to play it, and it struck all the right chords for me.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the only other thing that I had to say in terms of before the spoiler wall comes down, and then we're going to get into the real shit, the monkey did it, is that I think there's a tendency in media in general to shy away from specificity. And I mean, in the sense that this is clearly a guy who was super into old timey ships and, a very specific time and place and, light dusts of H.P. Lovecraft and things like that. I think that there's a power to using things that you are very interested in specifically in your game or your movie that will then speak to a generality with people, you know, and this game, it's something that's been on my mind lately, and this game really does that.
I learned a lot about ships,
and that's fascinating. Yeah.
Stuff that I didn't know initially. I did know some, because I don't know about you, but growing up, I grew up in Orange County, California, and
John, there's no world in which I know more about ships than you.
Well, but I was just gonna say, we actually, as part of our local curriculum, I think in 4th grade, we had a whole segment on, because the city I work at, for instance, is called Dana Point, Henry Dana 2 years before the mass. So
you just doxed yourself.
We all had to read that, and then we would go stay. You'd have a trip. Wow. There's a replica of a ship called the Pilgrim in the Dana Point Harbor, and we'd have to spend a field trip there. And I was one of the higher achievers in my class, so I got to be a mate and just order around all the other kids while they were pulling ropes all day and being and the local whatever the actual people who run the ship, they play the first mate and stuff. And I remember this one woman who I think was the first mate just viciously yelling at all the kids, they took their role seriously, what are you doing sitting there, nobody gets to sit down as long as you're here. It was. So I always had a sense of or that was when I first learned about mates versus the captain and what their roles are and blah blah blah. So we actually had, at least in my local school, a segment on the hierarchy of ship politics to some extent.
Holy
But I did not know anything about like an Orlop deck, let's say, prior to this game.
I was a AV Club kid, so you know.
Yeah, I did not know my way around this ship. I had to look at my map quite a few times. I'm like, what the fuck's the bow?
You know what's funny? You know what's funny, Dan? My dad is a captain. That's not a joke. I'm not. Everything else has been bullshit out of my mouth, but like that is actually true. My dad is and has been a captain for a respected captain for 50 fucking years.
Oh my god, that's incredible.
and yet you brought nothing to this game, Ted. If he saw you play it and didn't know your starboard from your stern, he would have been very upset.
I should play this with him next time I'm home. Actually, I bet he would really enjoy this game.
That'd be great. That's awesome.
That's what causes the falling out. Yeah.
He says, "You don't understand your way around this boat, do you?"
Like the depths of ignorance you've revealed, Ted, is just left me so disappointed. I took it for granted that you knew this.
I set the sails for you.
How do you not know the difference between a midshipman and a topsman or whatever?
Okay, we're done, Dan. Sorry.
No, I love it. That's great. I'm very much enjoying this picture.
Ted's disappointed father.
Yeah, I am not. Let's move on.
All right, so we've talked a little bit about some non-spoiler thoughts. Hopefully that gives you an idea if you want to check this game out. From here, we're going to kind of go into a recap through the game, talk through spoilers, really anything that stands out for us along the way. So if you don't want spoilers, drop off now. So cool. All right, so moving into the game itself. One thing I think that's important to call out is this game is played out of order. So really, I guess sort of your setup for the game is you get on the ship and you've got this death compass of sorts that if you go up to a dead body, it basically will like tell you the story of kind of everything that kind of went on before it of sorts. But because of it being set up this way, it's not like a linear game. You don't start at like chapter 1 and make your way through chapter 10. Instead, it's like you start with chapter 10, then you might jump to chapter 4, then you're at 8, and that kind of thing. So for the sake of clarity, we're just going to talk about it in chronological order for how you see it, I guess, at the end of the game, because I think it would get too in the weeds and confusing otherwise. So that's sort of our like setup going into the game.
Yeah, I think too. It's the chronology itself is kind of one of the bigger mysteries of like, you know, like you said, seeing what happened and figuring out what came before what and what led to what. And so, and to the point where, because it's all these events are triggered, like you said, these death scenes, these kind of little dioramas by bodies or hints of a death that you find, you know, mystically on the ship.
A chunk of meat.
Yeah, literally. At one point, the order isn't necessarily even going to be the same for everybody. Certain things have to come, but like you say, you literally have this journal and you're filling it in. So you might, like you say, see, okay, well, what I'm seeing now is chapter 2, and then I'm going to walk over to another body, and that's chapter 6. And you know, the funny thing is, if you recount the basic story to yourself, it's not overly complicated what happened, but
which I think is crucial.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the thoughts I had earlier that I didn't really necessarily want to mention until, like as Ted said, we're behind the spoiler wall, is like this also has kind of a Pirates of the Caribbean vibe, at least in terms of aesthetics to me. And part of that is that one of the bigger surprises that gets revealed is there's supernatural elements here, deep sea monsters and whatnot. And I didn't know that again, so when that first got revealed, that was awesome and just made me that much more intrigued. And then also finding out, you know, what their story is and why they're here and what they're trying to accomplish ostensibly you're trying to solve a series of murders, but the larger mystery is just what was the overall thing that happened here. And it's going to be, because it's told out of order, that's why it's so mysterious.
Yeah, and the nature of the non-linearity of the narrative is mitigated by that journal, which is so cleanly visually laid out. So you sort of see, like, I have X, Y, and Z to fill in to achieve my goal of understanding, you know, who killed who died in what way. And it's also, like, it's just a pretty work of art, too.
Yeah.
Like, the sketches are wonderful.
And it's got a glossary.
Mercifully.
Yeah. Oh, the journal is fantastic. And even that you know how long that chapter is. So it's like, you'll get to a chapter, and then it's like, part 1 of that chapter. Oh, this chapter has 5 parts. Okay, like, I'm gonna when I play or something, I'm gonna follow this sequence to its end, to before I might take a break, or if I had to stop for the day, okay, I'll finish the sequence, then I'll quit. It set it up really well for, there's one part of what the fuck's going on, how you feel a lot of the time, but also that there's some element of, okay, I know where I'm at, which is really helpful because, at first when they tell you, oh, there's like 50 people on the ship, figure out who they are and how you died. You're like, what the fuck? How am I going to figure that out?
Yeah. Well, too, in some of the scenes, like, some scenes are very simplistic. Those like, okay, I'm seeing one person die, and I can see how they died. Maybe I don't know their name, so the mystery isn't solved, but it's one murder or death. Then you walk into certain scenes and it's like, there's 10 people dying simultaneously from various ways. Like, what path do I go down? Which do I want to pursue? It's never really an overwhelming game, but there are brief moments where it appears like it would be, because you're like, oh man, like there's some big epic, let's just say, battle scenes, and there seems to be a lot of people like, this is 10 people died in 10 minutes versus, other scenarios where, one person got crushed or something.
Yep. I think that's where I did feel that first sense of overwhelming, because I think I got into one of those big scenarios, maybe my second chapter in or something like that I'd played, and it was like, oh my gosh, there's so many people, how would I know? Versus, as the game goes on in your brain, like, I don't know, gets better at being a detective or something like that, and there's less people to choose from. It helps you because you're like, oh, okay, cool. I can discern this because there's less options.
Well, and the game is also helpful in terms of there's a couple of there's two images in the journal, which between the two of them show every member of the crew, and the game gives you a lot of hints. Like, it'll tell you, once you flip to a chapter where somebody dies, let's just say, it'll have it'll take a small little image from that larger image of their face, and if it's still blurred, he's basically telling you don't have enough information to get to solve this completely. Meaning you need to know both their name and their manner of death, and if they were killed, who killed them. But murdered, I should say. They all died. And so there's little helpful things like that, and I also really appreciate how the way the game does it, where you solve 3 at a time. So it's not going to tell you if you're right until you've gotten 3 correct. And I felt like that was fun. It allows for a certain amount of kind of trial and error, but it doesn't give away the farm too much too early. Yeah,
I like that too. That felt like a fair checkpoint as well. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, you don't have to solve 5 or 10 before you're done, or if you could just piece them off one at a time. So
yeah, but you still get some confirmation.
Yeah, and if you're positive on 2, then you get the leeway to guess on the 3rd, which is lovely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciated that as well. And too, that I don't know if you had this struggle, but when I played something, especially early on, was like, okay, if I could get the character right, but the manner of death was sometimes challenging, because it's like, oh, do they mean stabbed or do they mean stripped? Or, things like that, where you're like, they have multiple terms for that. On the other side, which was nice, is that you could choose multiple options for certain characters, which was a good buffer the other way. But that would make me feel uncertain when I'm trying to build my 3 at times, where I was like, all right, do they mean they were stabbed by a monster? Do they mean this? I don't know what they mean.
Was he crushed by the cannon, or was it the beast who was crushing him with the cannon? Sort of a thing. Yeah, but yeah, I think that I did read that there were. Because of that, it is somewhat forgiving in that you can choose multiple kind of, let's just say, sentence structures or verbs for certain characters, because it isn't, necessarily clear how. I mean, in other words, they'd both be correct because the beast took the cannon and crushed the guy. So technically, the cannon crushed him, but it was also the fault of, like I said, the Kraken. Yeah,
that multiple death by option is one of those moments when you realize that when you're playing it, where you're like, okay, this game's fair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. When I realized that gave me some ease, because at first I was like, it would just get kind of uncertain. I'm like, do I not have my 3 because I didn't choose the right verbiage? But then when I saw it work, I was like, oh, okay, cool. This is fair.
And then you get the little ding where it says, well done.
And then your journal gets some extra lines to show that you've solved some deaths.
Yeah, well, talking about being fair, too, I think the other thing that's neat about the images, which show the crew, 2 scenes of the crew on the boat, is that again, the inference is that like there's a few different nationalities represented on this crew, and in the picture they tend to be seated together or like with one another, so that once you start to figure out that okay, and you also have a list of all the crew's names and nationalities, so you never have to figure out the names themselves, you just have to figure out who belongs to who. But you can start to figure out based on their dress or whatever that hey, okay, there's a certain amount of Indian crew members, and then here's a series of Indian names, and then those guys all seated in the image together, their dress looks like it's from India. Like I don't necessarily know who's who yet, but I at least kind of have a larger category from which to draw. And they do that there's multiple nationalities represented on, like I said, the boat. But again, it's fair like that. It's like, okay, would they really always all be seated next to each other? Not necessarily, but for the ease of logic and deduction, he's going to let his Lucas Pope is going to like allow you a few caveats, like where again, he's not trying to trick you and have them all spread out across the image. You could assume that, hey, if it says that there's two brothers on the ship, they're probably pictured next to each other, for instance.
Right.
Yep. And they had, did they have people who had the same role on the ship near each other too? Wasn't it like the topsmen were near each other and stuff like that? So it would be like by job or things like that. So that was really helpful because you're like, how am I going to pick out random sailor? At first, I had that sort of intimidation. I'm like, I don't know what a topsman is. Like, and then as time was like, oh, they're the guy on the top, or whatever. But
context, yeah.
But it made you think mildly. But then you're like, oh, I can figure this out. I'm capable.
Well, and because so many of these are like emergency situations, tentacle attack, like you do, it's someone who does rigging is going to run up and try to like save the rigging or something like that. So that's going to lend itself to doing some referencing for who does the rigging.
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable on the deck. I need to be, or the guy getting struck by lightning, probably one of the topsmen, like you said.
Right.
the guy in charge of the orlop deck is the carpenter is probably not the one climbing up the rigging and getting struck by lightning.
Yeah, exactly.
And also, you mentioned now I mentioned it, the rooms themselves too. Like the guy who suddenly in one scene is bursting out of a door that's labeled bosun's cabin is probably the bosun. Like things like that. Where it's like, sure, somebody else could have been in that room. And again, if you were going to be more dickish about it, you could have been like, that wasn't actually the bosun. That was just his lover. But
exactly.
But instead, it's like, no, the guy coming out of there it belongs to him. Like it's his room. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So I appreciated that as well. So okay, that's a little bit of sort of what you'd have going into the game. So itself, as we mentioned, supernatural does occur later on. We don't know that from the beginning, and so the voyage starts off, I would say, like any other voyage. Our first death is a guy who gets crushed by a pallet that has ropes break. So mundane. I think I got this near the end of the game, so it was not...
I felt the most bad for that guy.
Right.
You just got killed by luggage.
Yeah, the guy fighting the nightmarish snow crab deep sea creature guys, he had it coming. He was fighting back.
At least it was like it was a cool way to go. Not like the guy who got like, oops, I tripped, and my buddies weren't able to restrain the cargo in time.
Right.
Or whatever.
You died at port.
That's just a normal sailor death, Yeah. They're still in Falmouth. They haven't even left.
Yeah, I mean, your average seafaring voyage loses 50%, 60%. So it's pretty normal.
Everyone else was probably feeling good. Oh, the sea always takes one. Now the rest of us are good. Little did they know.
Right. Little did they know, for sure. After this, again, your kind of next chapter, really, where you get more, is, again, still more on the mundane side, where you get two people who died of a sickness. And so, again, pretty mild and just, this is a pretty normal thing.
Yeah, we have to kill off 50 people here. Some of them are just going to get a scurvy or whatever.
Yeah, well, I love that one visually because it's the sort of conspiratorial nature of like a possible outbreak where it's behind closed doors and it's a doctor. And I don't remember if it's the captain or the first mate, but they're sort of sitting there discussing like, we might have like a disease on board here.
I remember the visual of like them and like taking one of the bodies away in a stretcher. And that's you're like, because I think you've already been exposed at this point. Again, if you were playing the game itself, not chronologically, but as you were exposed to the deaths, you've seen some pretty violent stuff, and it's also like, but here's just a guy going up on a stretcher, and now they're worried about this practical concern of like, is there going to be an outbreak on this ship?
Yeah, and it's positioned at such a point in the actual narrative that's like, maybe no one was thinking this was about to go as south as it was going to. It's like, this is a problem. Let's get over this, move on. But, we've had, 3 deaths now before the first murder,
Right. Yeah, and it sort of sets the, is this going to get worse for the ship? Is that where things get off the rails? Because, it did a plague start or something like that, and that...
Yeah, there's kind of an escalation here, too. If you think about now that I'm looking at your notes and seeing it laid out chronologically, it's like, okay, cargo death, and then sickness, and then we kind of jump into murder, and then from there it gets really crazy. So funny enough how, when you look back at it, it's like, oh, there's actually kind of an escalation here. Here's the many ways you could die that would be fairly predictable on a ship, and here's the then later on are going to be the less, let's say, predictable or expected ones.
Yeah, I never thought of that either. It's neat to see it laid out in Dan's notes chronologically, because it is exactly what you're saying is an escalation.
and it keeps ratcheting it up, because at first you're like, okay, is it that the crew revolted? That was sort of what I expected jumping into the game. I think your first one, you get pieces of that kind of thing, and so that's just what I imagined is ultimately the ship just revolts against itself multiple times and everyone gets killed. That was sort of what I expected going in.
Factions and whatnot.
Lots of things. Yeah, that's what I kind of figured would happen.
Well, even though I'm going to respect the chronology, I will say that the first thing I think you come across when you first use the memento mortem or whatever it's called is literally a gun blasting in what appears to be your face, and of course there's actually a person behind where you start that's getting shot. But it's the first ancient or old image that you see or memory is literally a gun firing straight into your face.
I mean, we'll describe that when we get to it in the chronological. But when I think of this game, that's the image.
Yeah. And without getting too into it, because we'll save it, when you talk about mutiny and stuff, it's they certainly kind of throw you that bone early on. Let's just say in terms of experience, not chronology.
Yeah, that's true. That image is that had me sucked in when that happened. It was this is really
and
cool.
The music. Yeah, that's the first time I got exposed to the music, and they there's a lot of good little stings in terms of just kind of the structure of how the story plays, and when you're getting zapped back in time and stuff, and that's where I was just like, whoa, what is this?
Yeah, the music,
all the aesthetics, the visuals, the music, and then a gun in my face. Awesome.
Put the soundtrack out on vinyl. Put it out on vinyl. I will give you my money.
Okay, David.
Yeah, super cool. As we mentioned, it's been sort of more mundane deaths. Now we move into murder, as we said. And also, I'm not going to name most of the characters through this game. I think that, I don't want to memorize 50 names.
It'd be near impossible.
Yeah, it would be very annoying. But I did name one, just because I think they held a place of significance, being the second mate, a guy named Edward Nichols, tries to steal this formation chest. So there are a couple passengers who I think are maybe not quite royalty, but maybe, and they have this pretty remarkable chest that they have on board that they're taking from England to, I guess, back home.
Lord knows how they got to England, but anyway.
Yeah.
And why they took this with them, but they did.
Yeah, but they did. And so the second mate sees this as an opportunity. I'm going to steal this, and I can abandon ship, and then I'll be rich, kind of thing. And when he's going to steal it, he gets caught by another one of the sailors. And so he kills him, and then one of the guards, who's, I believe one of the Chinese guards, is there, and he knocks him out, and then basically blames the murder on the guard. And he's like, the guard was here, and he was trying to steal this. This guy tried to stop him. He got killed. So then, I knocked him out, now we're here. And he, pays off one of the other Chinese to translate the guard confessing to a murder when he's saying, no, it's the second mate.
Yeah. And I should also point out, too, when we mentioned the 2 images of all the crew, one of the images is basically the execution of this guard, by sort of hanging / firing squad. And so that there was at some point an execution on the ship, and this is the reveal of ultimately who it was that was executed, being falsely framed for murder.
Well, I love this vignette diorama too, because this one almost at the time feels like a self-contained murder mystery, and then you, like you said, you double back up to that the image of all of them executing the man who's blamed later. But it's sort of its own, what I would think the game was going into it. Here's a little bespoke murder mystery in the middle of this greater madness.
Yeah, it's a cool set. So Nicholas from here, kind of is like, all right, cool, I have a second chance to steal this. And so he organizes kind of a group robbery. He has a couple sailors who are loyal to him. And he also kidnaps a couple of these passengers, steals the chest, and basically abandons ship, and is trying to make off kind of with kidnappers, with the gold, and with a small crew. And this takes us directly into the supernatural. So this group is heading out into like small ships, and then a group of mermaids show up and start attacking them. This is super chaotic. I really liked these dioramas of just seeing each one go. I thought this was really cool.
Yeah, it's like the mermaids attacking rowboats, and I don't remember like whatever it is that's in the chest. It's like I don't know. I think it was like a stone or something. I don't remember if it like touched the water or not, to be honest. But something. But you get the sense suddenly that like there's these supernatural. This is where you get your first hint that supernatural forces want whatever this MacGuffin is. You know, like something down deep is coming for this, and the mermaids. I don't think this is again. In playing the game, this isn't necessarily the first time you come across them, but
this is one of the last ones you see.
Yeah, but this is where you start to, again, it's more like a missing puzzle, and I like the design of the mermaids, how they shoot spikes out of their tails. Like first time I saw one, I couldn't tell what it was, and I thought it was like a lobster, just because I only saw like the bottom half, whatever the first diorama was. But here it's more clear. But it's like these mermaids, sirens, whatever. They're like these look like. I don't know, there's like a more biological, like kind of grotesque nature to them where it's like, oh, if mermaids were real, they would probably look something more like this than just, Ariel.
Well, to me, they look like a character or creature that you would fight in an old PC game, like if you're playing Quake or something. Like they're shooting spikes at you, like, so to me, I'm like, here we are. We're in a game where if this was a first-person shooter, this would exist.
Yeah, these mermaids are monsters, in other words. They're not, eye candy.
Yeah, so if you see a mermaid, do not follow their siren's call.
Yeah, not at all. They're also that even the game. I think they're all called Terrible Beast, right? In this, they don't get a different classification. They're not mermaid instead, which I thought was interesting too. When I was doing it, I'm like, all right, killed by what? And I'm like, guess they're a beast. And then the game's like, yep, they're a beast. Okay, cool.
They're all just beast, all the various things you come across, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Which is cool. I guess that not having to solve it, not having a name for it, not having they're actually good or something like that. Instead, it's like, no, they're different. Different monsters on the ocean.
Well, it kind of preserves, some of the mystery too. Of like, I mean, we all interpret them clearly as mermaids, like, but it still leaves kind of a certain amount of it kind of out there. Be like, hey, it's some, like I said, monstrous supernatural beast. We're not going to necessarily name it. Similarly, I think that part of the reason I love the design of this and some of the other creatures you come across is because of that old graphic style we were talking about. It kind of obscures them a little bit. It doesn't. Ted and I were mentioning this earlier, like more fidelity or more detail would have probably made these creatures less interesting. Like it manages, to preserve a certain amount of, mystique because of the lack of detail. And don't get me wrong, there's detail here. Like you get a full sense of kind of the anatomy of some of these things, but it doesn't have to look straight from the real world. It just has to fit the world it's in.
Yeah, totally. I agree. Ultimately, this chapter, like this section, gets resolved. Basically, all the crew gets killed. You get them, get spikes thrown at them, all of that. One of the prisoners, I think, is able to use whatever's in the chest somehow to basically like knock the mermaids out. And so the mermaids get knocked out. All of the prisoners, or all of the escapees, are all dead. All of the prisoners but one are dead, and then Lord Nicholas is alive, but as he comes back to the ship, he basically is like, hey, I unsteal these people, and they just shoot him.
Well, wasn't it one of the like foremost guards or whatever who was left back there, I think kind of like from like one of the lower decks, like sneaks out and like shoots him, like, I know what you did. Versus him kind of be like, hey, I don't, there's no dialogue, so you don't know what his story was. But I imagine like, oh, I got kidnapped too, and this was not my plan. Would I really be coming back? As even though everybody's dead and I'm out, just got a couple rowboats out in the open sea with some mermaid carcasses.
They got me, guys.
Yeah. Right.
I stopped them. Don't worry. Wasn't my idea.
I like that you, Dan, you use the phrase unsteal. The next time I'm shoplifting at Best Buy, by and I get caught, I'm going to say like, I unsteal. And therefore they have to let me go. You know?
I called unsteal. You have to let me leave.
Yeah. Oh, he has invoked the treatise of unsteal.
We recognize that here at Best Buy.
Yeah, if I didn't make my way out the door yet or reach land in this case, I still get to call unsteal.
Didn't really mean it. So back on the Obra Dinn.
Recognize unsteal here at Best Buy. Very good, very good.
I want to put like a sticker of that on their stores now.
Yeah.
We recognize unsteal. Back on the ship though, so we've made it back. Really, just the chest, and then one of the prisoners, one of the for motions passengers, back on there. But the other mermaids, they get thrown into kind of like a makeshift jail cell, I guess, at the bottom of the boat that I think has some water in it.
Yeah, they call, again, it's been a while since I played it, but they refer to that as the lazarette. Was that weird?
Yeah,
because it's locked for the longest time in the game, and again, we're going in chronological order, but like you have to kind of do something a little extra special to even get it there and see these scenes.
And had you guys ever heard the word lazarette?
No.
Me neither.
No.
Yeah, no. I mean,
so it seems so mysterious.
Yeah, now I'm an expert. I mean, at lazarettes, but at the time,
any word with a Z.
I don't. For some reason, I feel like that just even though I know this wasn't what it was, it just sounds like a toilet to me. Like, the lazarette. You know, they had to go somewhere.
Is that why earlier you're like, I have to use your lazarette, sir?
Perhaps
you have a sulfur stick to hide my scent?
Yeah, like the many matches.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It just sounds like it. I don't know. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me that doesn't sound like a toilet. I mean, it should be.
You're not wrong. It's your opinion, man.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Ted. Thank you for that validation.
So they throw the unconscious mermaids down there, but I think one of them kind of wakes up as they're getting thrown down there, so they kill a couple of the crew members kind of on their way down. I feel like at this point I would question whether it's even worth it to deal with these mermaids this early on. Of course it ramps up more as it goes, but I don't know.
When they're going down the decks, they're like on a stretcher. They're going down the decks. This is where I first thought they were lobsters, because I think that was, even though we're already, I don't know, chapter 5 or something. This was, I think, the first time I saw one of the mermaids. This was, you see them getting brought into the ship before you see them, late attacking on the rowboats, even though that chronologically happens earlier. So, yeah, I just saw this tail flipping up with spikes coming out of it, and guys getting impaled on these shooting spikes. And it was just kind of like, what? I mean, again, there's so many little mysteries in this game, and one of these was, what is that thing? Like, what is it that they're carrying? And then, of course, why, you're only going to learn much later. But yeah, like, those are some of the more, not some of the most gruesome deaths, but certainly ones that seemed less than ideal for the victim, right? Like, these are pretty bad. We moved beyond the murder. Now we're on to straight, supernatural, gore.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and then that button just keeps getting pushed. So
yeah, man.
Also in this, you do have one of the crew members like try to free the mermaids, because I think he sort of views them as bad luck, which he's probably right. But then he gets thrown in prison too. So you've kind of got that going on. Then you get these crab riding monsters. I don't know what you'd even call them exactly.
Yeah, the soldiers of the sea.
I'm pretty sure that somebody called them they mentioned them demons, but that's the point, I think, where like why we talked about saying beast earlier, like what would you even call these? Like by naming them almost takes away some of their mystery, right? So I kind of like then that they're just beast. But yeah, these things were some of my favorite visual creations in the game.
Oh, by far. And again, these guys are right out of like Doom or Quake or something.
Oh yeah. I think that this was where you got some of your most brutal deaths too, because I remember there's one, right, where the crab thing's using its like claws on a dude's neck while like stabbing him. With,
it looks like he's about to scissor his head right off with it. I mean, how would you describe them? They're almost like shrouded. I don't know if there's no sex or gender, but I almost want to think of them as like hags riding giant snow crabs.
Well, they're bipedal, so they read as people.
Yeah.
Like riding these snow crabs, and they have almost a cloak of like kelp on them. What would you say?
Well, that's my point. Is it could be kelp? It could be a veil. I don't know. Like that's again where like the lack of resolution actually adds
It's such
to
a
it.
benefit. Yeah, I mean they're lovely. They're like my favorite design.
Oh, when
in the
I
entire
first
thing.
saw that, it was another moment when I first saw those
Lovely.
things where I was just like, yes, I love this game. Like, it was just next level. Like, I love that I'm getting this.
Well, and my Lovecraftian fear of the sea is being pinged at this point. Like I was right. That's what's down there. Don't fuck with the sea.
This crazy little demon children riding snow crabs.
Yep, you stole their jewels.
Yeah, they almost feel like the Nazgul from Lord of the Rings, except they're on these
Yeah.
crab things.
Oh, yeah,
where it's
good
just
call.
like their mystery makes them more scary, which is really
Yeah.
cool. And that they're giant fucking crabs just wrecking this boat. Like, it's wild.
Yeah, and they're sort of surrounded by 3 or 4 seamen or topmen or whatever, bosun, and they're just like they're attacking in a multifaceted way.
Yeah.
So it's like one is sword fighting with his leg with one, shooting a spike at another guy.
Well, like the Nazgul
Yeah.
one's throwing fire at it.
Yeah.
Well, I love too. Again, revisiting it this morning, we came across one of these scenes, and we talk about them, but you can also explore these scenes. So some of the clues, for instance, you get because like you're presented with a scene, but there's still an open hallway that you can kind of go down, and that's where you might see somebody else running away or doing something. And this is one where there's the main kind of crab fight, and then you can walk up the stairs and see like the other one coming down, or an earlier death where there's like a lightning strike, and you can start to see where the crabs are coming up from out of the sea, kind of on the peripheral. Like there's a lot of fun things like that where you may be getting the moment before or the moment after, but you can see how the scene was playing out, despite the fact that there's no real movement other than your own, because these are like moments frozen in time.
Yeah, and because they're frozen in time, it's almost like when you do a no clip in like an old video game, and you're just sort of looking at the rendered images, drawings, or what have you. It kind of gave me that same feeling when like I do the no clip code. I keep saying Quake. I don't know why, because it makes me think of Quake.
Because you love Quake.
I do. I think Quake's a great game, but like you put in the no clip code, and you're sort of walking outside the bounds of the world and looking at all of the different animations that they've made. So it tickled that feeling for me as well, just in general playing the game.
Yeah, it's really cool. There's a lot more detail or things going on than beyond the specific moment you start out looking at, like you said, that you can keep exploring. I was thinking it sort of feels like those. You ever seen those like old I don't know, Civil War paintings or whatever of like a battle, and it's like there's just shit going on everywhere in the painting, and you're like, oh, there's dudes climbing the wall. There's people over here doing this. There's that.
Yeah, like
This
there's
again
definitely
evokes that feeling.
Yeah, like there's definitely a focus, but there's a lot of fun other things happening, on the borders or the outside that focus, the peripherals, like I said. So yeah, and honestly, you have to figure that out because certain things, that's how you're going to find the answer. Is you have to know to look. Like there are boundaries. You can't explore the whole ship in every moment in time, but often you can explore more than you may initially realize. Is the point.
Right, because there's one. I don't remember where it is along the way. There's a guy that's behind the wall, right? For one of them who's like, maybe it's in this fight, but there's someone who's like in the weird hallways like behind.
I remember that. I don't know if it was this fight or not, but yes, there's like the main action, and then you find out he got shot through the wall. So to find his body, right, you actually have to go behind the wall and see where he got shot through it accidentally by one of the other crew members or something, I believe.
Yeah. Which is cool. Like again, just what they give us here is pretty neat.
I think you find a blood trail.
I think you're right, yeah, because they'd gotten like hurt before that and tried to get to safety and then got killed anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah,
pretty cool. Soldiers of the Sea, crab people, pretty wild.
crab people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The crab people. This is probably my main favorite set piece, although one other comes very close, which has already been mentioned. But I just loved the design of these guys so much that I think it was the overall favorite little segment for me.
Yeah, this
and
was
the
great.
brutals. Well, actually, the other one I'm thinking of was the Kraken, but that was pretty brutal too. But like you say, I think one of my favorite images is I think at one point, like you said, the crab has his pinches around like two guys' heads, and you just know they're gonna come off just scissors. Like it's gonna be the cleanest. They actually probably got the cleanest deaths, quickest.
Right. Yeah. So pretty brutal, but unfortunately for the Obra Dinn, the supernatural is still after them. So in our next chapter, you've got a couple people who abandon ship and escape, and are like, "I'm out. I don't want to. I want to be a part of this."
The smart people.
Yeah, the couple smart people head out,
Which is fun because that's the one like sort of break in the tradition of the game, and that you list them as like gone. versus murdered.
Yeah, like that's true. Not everybody necessarily died. There are a few people who just disappeared.
Yeah, the exception that
you
proves
don't know.
the rule.
Fate unknown, wasn't that
Yeah.
the actual choice?
Yeah, that was cool. I like that a lot of that change, because at this point I hadn't expected that. I just assumed everyone would die, so that was a cool surprise. And then, of course, the Obra Dinn gets attacked by our Kraken. I think this is the deadliest scene, and maybe the longest one. This one might have, for some reason, I remember this one had like maybe 7, part 1, part 2 through 7, something like that. So
individual segments,
and multiple people getting killed in a scene too. So it wasn't like one per.
And in terms of personal chronology, like when you're actually playing the game, you're going to see this real quick.
Well, like you said earlier, Dan, this is one of the first ones you come across and where you first get the taste of the supernatural of like, wait a minute. Although even then you never know because, it's obviously a supernaturally large amount of tentacles and beast, but you don't know necessarily what the game's going for in the tone where this could still maybe just... Well, it's a stretch.
I don't know, dude. It's a giant Jules Verne tentacle Lovecraft.
Well, but that's my point. You don't necessarily know that mermaids and crab people are going to follow this. Like, it could be like, okay, it's a little. How deep is it wading into the supernatural here? Like, you could still be writing a line where, okay, this was the climax of some giant beast fight, but. No, it was just a sign of more of this delicious sea monsters to come. And I should say too that like I think the implication would be that like the mermaids are calling all of these creatures, like they're coming at this point. I assume to rescue the mermaids. But yeah, the Kraken scene, and it's also raining, right? It's
wonderful.
And some of the deaths here are pretty good, and you see like the chronology of how they were fighting it, and like some self-sacrifice, let's say.
Yeah, there's one gentleman who basically became a living bomb, and you see him in the second of detonation. Yeah, because I guess the conceit is the memento
mortem.
Memento mortem, the device that you're using to clock.
Remember death, as they say. Right?
Remember death is the second, which I'm assuming the soul passes from the body, is the moment that it records.
And the instant of death.
Yeah, so the instant of death for this guy is when he fucking explodes. So it's a living bomb frozen in time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also remember one of the more gruesome ones is one guy gets torn in half, and I guess because that moment
cleft in twain.
Well, yeah, that moment where you see him, he's already been kind of in half a second with his intestines flailing around. So that means that he had a moment of like probably knowing he's been ripped in half but still alive.
Right. Yeah.
This was so intense.
But yeah, this is the set piece of all set pieces. And when I was talking about the crab people, I was saying this was the other one that's up there for me. I love the crab people design so much that that one kind of edges this one out. But the whole Kraken sequence is awesome.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And give us that one we mentioned early on of the cannon crushing a guy, and you're like, all right, who's that under there? Like, and
the different decks.
Well, that's just good slapstick.
Uh-huh. Had to lighten the mood. That was cool.
Benny Hill music.
The multiple decks too, though. You really feel this like all on assault, and even like thinking like they're shooting a cannon at this Kraken, and the Kraken's still going, or this dude exploded himself on it. Like it's just like it's pretty wild. Like just seen here. For
the
sure.
Little layers of chaos that are going on, like the different stories unfolding, are little like as this Kraken's attacking. Like everybody has their own story with their own tentacle.
Yeah, yeah. And like you said, Dan, I think this is the one that has the most like sub chapters or however it's divided in the journal.
Well, yeah, especially when you think about, like you said, those decks. Like what's because at some point it's I think of the main set piece to me is the main deck. No pun intended, but where and that's probably the most grandiose. But yeah, everyone was having to fight, their own battle with cannons and portholes and tentacles on these. I guess this would be the gunner deck primarily. And then those guys went out, not as heroically as the guy who exploded himself. They're just getting killed by shifting cannons. And one guy basically shoots himself, right? Because they load the cannon and then the tentacle turns it and basically the cannon fires on him.
That one's me.
Yeah, that's how Ted would go out.
Yeah,
not me. I'd be the captain.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, based on your story earlier about your youth and your captain camp or whatever, where you were sort of humble bragging about yourself, I caught what you were doing there.
Yeah, of course. Well, I wanted to make sure to note that I was a mate. I wasn't one of the lowly seamen just
Yeah, well, you view podcasts like going to prison. Like, you need to target everyone and let them know you're the big man in the room.
Yeah, exactly. It's like just so we know, if we all were on a boat, I would immediately get promoted to mate. Like, I wouldn't have to wait,
Yeah, the SS podcast with our captain. You have to go shoot Ira Glass or whatever.
Yeah.
You would make it to the end of this game in this scenario, for sure.
Ted doesn't even know what an Orlop deck is. Don't listen to that guy.
All right. Let's move on.
I'm the guy that got crushed by the luggage, for sure. I'll be that guy. Oh, no. I didn't make it out. I'm very early, unfortunately. Or I'll take the guy getting struck by lightning.
It's funny. The guy getting crushed by the luggage is the funnier joke, but when I went to make it, I was like, I'm not doing that to myself.
So
right.
okay, our doom has ended. We've gotten away from our Kraken, and our captain Witterall goes and is like, all right, these mermaids have caused enough trouble, and so he kills 2 of the mermaids, and then the third mermaid, it seems he's kind of struck a deal with them and saying, call off the monsters of the sea, let us get back to port, and I'll let you out. Basically.
And great image of him standing over the third cage, like wielding his gun down at the mermaid.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you saw what I did to your sisters.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty intense there. And then also kind of alongside of this, Dr. Henry Evans has heard about the death compass that the East India Company has. And so he's like, okay, well, I want people to be able to piece this together. So he kills his pet monkey in case this death compass is a real thing. So he does that to sort of set us up for the game further.
Because this is the whole sequence. You can complete the game without coming across. If you don't...
It's wild to me.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's like, it'll let you know. I think it actually happened to me maybe the first time, and then I figured out what I needed to do. But yeah, because the idea is, we get all these scenes, but there has to be a death taking place of a crew member in order for you to see it. So, as you said, Dan, like, he figures, well, I'll sacrifice my monkey, then this scene will be able to be witnessed later.
I love that. It's a character within the cosmos of this game, using the mechanics to send a message. Like, that's so good.
Yeah, it's super cool. After this, of course, the crew is not happy with their time on the Obra Dinn. They keep getting attacked by monsters and are questioning their captain. So there's a part where they're discussing a mutiny, and one of the people loyal to the captain hears this and starts yelling mutiny, but then he gets killed by the mutineers. Meanwhile,
some good deaths here too.
Yeah, good deaths here.
It also makes me think of The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou when they're mutinying and he just looks at them and says, "Do you all not like me anymore?" So good.
That's great. Dr. Evans, though, uses this as his opportunity to escape. Because, people are distracted with this mutiny. Okay, no one's going to watch us. Let's go. So he leaves with 4 other people. I think the passengers and then maybe like 1 or 2 sailors. And they're all going to head off. As they're leaving, one of them gets killed by some of the sailors who think that maybe they're part of the mutiny or just trying to stop them. So 4 of our people get away, but we do have a couple deaths along here. And... the ship's in a bad state. They've basically had several quarrels among themselves. The supernatural has taken them on. The Obra Dinn isn't in a great spot.
Absolute nightmare.
Yeah, well, it's funny how a couple mermaid attacks and crab people attacks can really, ruin your kind of team cohesion,
Yeah. 1 incident, 2 incidents, but not 7 incidents.
Yeah, it's like I could deal with the mermaids, and it was one thing to see my friend get impaled, but as soon as Bob had to sacrifice himself with that explosion, I thought maybe the captain's management of the ship was lackluster.
I thought this would be a nice time at sea, and this has sucked. Yeah, so you finally got your crew is whittled down actually to 3 people, and the captain, and so they are like, all right. We've got to turn on him because we're not going to make it back with him in charge. Look, 50 other people are dead. So he kills each of them.
Like a badass.
The captain is a badass.
Badass.
This is also where the game starts. So this is, from your perspective, this is the first diorama that you get to see. And this is the one that I was saying, like, this is the game in my head.
The first one is him killing, I forget which mate it was, but his brother-in-law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there are a few female passengers on the ship, which, I don't know, but isn't that like a thing I remember back in the day where like sailors didn't like having women on ships?
'Tis bad luck.
Yeah, so anyway, but yeah, again, one of the fun things that clues you put together is that it's his brother-in-law because you figure out who the captain's wife is, and you see her full name, and she has like her maiden name, which also happens to match the last name of, I think he was the third mate, but I don't remember for sure. And then later, and then he confesses to her like dying body because she got crushed by rigging. I killed your brother. I think he even says that. It's like, yeah, you did.
But he does like fight them off like an action hero.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
They're basically saying, open this door, and he's like, oh, I'll open this door, and he opens it, blasts two of them, and then fights the guy off who's coming to knife him.
Well, I think he shoots the brother-in-law, and the other like bashes the other one in the cabin, and then again, where you can explore, you can see another guy coming around from behind, and you can actually find the moments where he's like jumping down to sneak up behind the captain.
He's flanking him.
Well, I think he literally does flank him with a knife, but the captain still like bashes him in the face with a club. But basically, at the end of it, the captain's still alive. These three guys are dead.
Yeah, but it is a great way to sort of open the game for you and to see this vignette as, again, like its own little murder mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I thought that was really great, too, even with just like the brother-in-law clue, like you talked about. Because then it's like, oh, okay, I can figure out several people right away. And it gives you that easy intro as to how this game works, but still in a very cool way to get it going.
Yeah, and I think that, I don't know that if then they explicitly say that he's the captain, but it's something where you can just kind of intuit based on, one, that this feels, like you said, a mutiny, and, well, of course, a mutiny requires a captain to attack and overturn, so it makes sense that that's who this guy is, and then you can very quickly piece together the identities of at least a few of these people, and then, like, when you see the captain's death, there's no mystery what happened there. So yeah, it's a good way to kind of like, okay, we're going to give you some principal players and let you knock them out early.
Yeah, really, really nice setup for the game itself. Pretty cool. So then, from here, you've managed to complete all of these. You've taken your compass around. You've seen all of your deaths, and you get kind of yelled at by the sailor below who brought you to the ship. Hey, we got to go. A big storm's coming, and the Obra Dinn sinks right after you leave. And the East India Insurance Company pays out based on the crew's performance. So you get this big list of everyone on the crew, and if they like showed bravery or did well, they'll get the pay they were still owed, or maybe even a bonus kind of thing to their family. And then for people that like abandoned ship or did bad things, then they'll get like a fine next to their name for doing poorly.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
The bureaucracy brought into it.
Well,
I love
that's
that.
just the whole conceit that you're just doing this to figure out what your payouts are. Like, what money do we owe? That's why we want to figure out what happened.
You're the greatest insurance adjuster in history. For sure.
Yeah, watch out, Jake from State Farm. Like,
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. As just bringing that in of like, this is again why you're here and all of that. I thought that was fun and unexpected as well. So, then after this, you get a quick fast forward to a year later in London. And you get sent the monkey's paw from Dr. Evans, and you get a note from one of the women passengers who escaped with him saying that Dr. Evans had died from some sickness, but he saw your insurance report. He thought you did like a really good job at this, and he wanted to send you the monkey's paw to give you the last chapter, because the chapter where the captain kills the mermaids and stuff, you don't have access to that. There's one chapter that's like hidden.
Yeah, the Lazarette chapter.
The bargain.
Yeah, the Lazarette one. You don't have access to that until the monkey's paw comes, and then that lets you back in there, even though the ship's gone, which, again, was really, really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fun way to kind of get that final scene, and then, like you said, put all the pieces of the puzzle together. And
Well, and it's great because it's the one moment in the game where you're taken out of the ship itself, so it's like a new rendered environment that you're looking at.
the little office or whatever you mean.
And depending on how well you did in the game, like there's different objects on the shelves. Did you guys notice that?
You told me. I didn't notice it at the time.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, well, I only know because I listened to a recent interview with Lucas Pope. But yeah, it's like different items on the shelves depending on how many fates you were able to.
Little totems.
Yeah, like little things that would evoke other games and other adventures that this insurance adjuster has had, which is a fun little Easter egg.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's cool. So that ends up wrapping the game itself. So I guess kind of moving on, we've gotten to say a bit about this game, but did you guys have anything else you wanted to say about the game that we didn't get to cover?
I mean, I think we hit, most of the big points that I thought. I just want to stress that I think this is just a very enjoyable game. And, we talked about spoilers. This is one where you really don't want to know a whole lot going in. And the fact that I didn't know a whole lot going in, aside from the fact that it was highly praised, really added to my experience. And it felt like a layer of mysteries. First, what the game was, and then what my goal was, how it was structured. And just every time you peeled back another layer of like what was going on, I was always just so happy at the choices that were made. It truly feels like one of those games where I have no suggestion. I have no notes. I have no way to make this game better. It succeeds exactly at what it's trying to do, and it does what it wants to do so well. And I don't say that about a lot of games. There's plenty of games out there that I love, but I'm like, well, but this could have been a little bit better, or that could have been a little bit better. I really don't have any criticism of this game for, unless you hate the genre, you hate fundamentally what it is, I suppose you wouldn't enjoy it. But what it does so well. And like we said, it's fair. Everything makes sense. I never felt like it was cheap. It never felt like it was trying to cheat me. Again, I'm not saying there isn't stuff that's hard to find, and that I wasn't, playing a little bit of trial and error with some of the different sailors. Like, well, I know it's one of these four guys. Let me just try some different names. But it all added up and made sense, and it was just fun, visually interesting. I don't know. I guess there's not much I can say beyond how much I enjoyed it. We did an episode of our own of we don't do top games of a year because we don't play enough in a particular year to do that. But I named it the favorite game that I had played last year of all the
we do a top 5 games that we played.
Yeah, because that's all we can, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I named this number 1. I absolutely enjoyed and loved this game, and I was nervous that Ted wouldn't when I first recommended it after having played it. But I knew I was going to insist that regardless of how we felt about it, we do an episode, just because I was so enamored with it.
Yeah, and I love adventure games, and adventure games have had like a lovely comeback in recent years after being dormant for quite some time. And this, I don't know if I would classify it just as an adventure game, but this is a branch of that, and it allowed me to kind of be a part of the creation of the story, which in a sense, which fires my brain in many ways, and it just. God, it all just tickled me so well, and the kind of rant I went on at the beginning of the show about giving me agency in this, and it's fair, and it's this is a little hippy dippy, but it's not like totally cold. Even though you're playing a bunch of like static dioramas, there is like an interest and a warmth to these sort of like weird stories.
I think the music has a lot to do with
the
that.
music. You're totally right. That's exactly what it is. Yeah, we didn't talk much about the music. The music is like best in class. Like it is A+. And it is augmenting your play, and it's triggering, and it's cueing, and it's allowing you to understand the different planes of existence you're on. So, like, it only plays when you're in the flashbacks, and it gives the little stings when you're doing menu things. And otherwise, when you're exploring and doing your initial investigation, it's quiet other than the sound design, right?
Yeah.
So it's, like, also guiding your mind into which mode of play you're in.
That's true.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's really cool. I was thinking also, I guess one more thing here, is John had mentioned he'd played it a couple times, but I feel like this is totally a game you could go play again and probably enjoy just as much. Like if I pick this up in 2 years, I'm gonna remember like 3 people's names. I'm not gonna have almost any of that. And so you could probably experience it like new in a lot of ways because you're not gonna.
I think
you're not gonna know the mysteries.
You're gonna know where that next body is more likely, but you're not gonna remember who it was, or like I said, that hanging piece of meat will probably like be you'll know kind of I should be looking down this hallway, even though I don't necessarily remember what it is I'm gonna find. But yeah, that is definitely true. Like there's not a lot of immediate replayability because it is ultimately a mystery that you've now solved.
Right.
But there's so much going on. It's such a deep mystery that like you say, give it some time, and there'll be plenty to rediscover.
And we kind of talked about, like, I think on our episode about it, it's like recommend it to a friend and then sit in the room with them and give them the little, like, oh, you should go over there.
Yeah,
Go
that
check
would be a
out.
fun thing to do. I mean, it's still fairly long
idea.
for what it is.
Yeah.
I have to say too. It's not, even though it's a murder mystery. It's still our extended murder mystery. It's still I think on average about an 8-hour game.
Yeah, I think I clocked in at like 12.
Yeah, I think I was somewhere around there too. Yeah, so pretty cool game. Yeah, we all have lots that we love about it. I guess from here, I've got a couple people who wrote in about the game, so I'll see what they have to say.
Oh, great.
First up, I've got C. Reed on Twitter who said it loved it. It's a really interesting game. I only had slight trouble beating it and looking up information. I accidentally gave a little more away when I looked things up. But, that's too bad, but still impressed with it as a whole. Yeah, you can definitely run into spoilers on there. Their information's pretty thorough. I looked some of them up once I got stuck. And be like, okay, I need to look something up to like get me through this because I want to finish this game. I don't want to be caught here, kind of thing.
Yeah,
but
sure.
The podcaster's dilemma.
Yeah, right. Yes, but the wiki and stuff is really thorough, so you could totally run into like I wanted to find this one name and I saw the 6 people who were in this scene.
Yeah, I'd recommending have the wiki that is John available to you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I looked anything up, but I think we didn't. This was still when I was playing it. I wasn't sure that we were going to do an episode, so I was able to take a little bit more time. But yeah, and I think also the fear being, like you said, of this is the kind of thing where maybe I just want to know one little thing, but I might accidentally see 2 or 3 things, But it makes sense because they're definitely. I think overall, it's pretty. There's not anything too hard, except for there may be 3 or 4 particular moments that I remember like struggling with. Like I keep referencing the hanging meat, like certain things that are pretty obscure and kind of wall off the rest of the game. Versus like, well, you can't really trial and error it because I've got to find the next body and it isn't obvious where that is. Versus like what this guy's name is. Anyway.
Yeah, that's true. I did have to do that once or twice because parts of the ship opened up and I hadn't realized they could. Mm-hmm. So it was like, okay, where do I go to start this next sequence? And it was like, oh, you need to go here. And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't know I could keep going down or that this door led somewhere else or whatever.
Yeah, it doesn't telegraph that. Well, maybe a few things right at the beginning just so you know the basic premise. But after that, I mean, like I said, it's fair, but we're not gonna finger point.
It's a real detective game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say that the only guidance you really get after that is you get the like smoke spirit thing leading you to the next body in between, which is good. I'm glad you didn't have to like look for that.
The smoke monster?
Yeah, the smoke monster guides you. Only it's a good smoke monster. Yeah.
Yeah, and it didn't feel annoying or something like that, or where you were too like guided. Instead, I think if you had to just wander around until you found the next part of that chapter, that would be too much. So I think that was right.
It feels like it's leading you deeper into because usually those are the bodies, right, where you can't even get straight to that chapter. You have to go into a memory and then from there another memory, right? Like there's like these layers. It's kind of a conception. There's like these layers of murder memories.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Next up, we've got Joseph on Twitter who said, beautiful and most of all, refreshing. So, big fan of this game as well. And then last one we've got is from Adam on Twitter who said, just leaving this here, and it was a link to a video he made on why you need to play Obra Dinn. So, Adam, likewise, in the same camp as us, of this is a great game. People should really be playing it.
Yeah, I really haven't heard too much criticism. I feel like it seems like, of course, it's not really this binary, but like you either love this game or you haven't played it. It seems to be the general reaction. Or love may be a strong word, but like you enjoy it or you haven't played it. I don't see a lot of negative.
It was very critically well received for sure.
Mm-hmm. It seems like if you were someone who didn't like this game, you got stuck early on and didn't come back, and I don't know. Can you? I mean, not that you can't have an opinion on something that you're only 10% into, but like, I don't know. It's not a very well-rounded opinion. I think it would just be, I got stuck, so I stopped playing, and you're like, all right, I could see that.
or yeah, I mean, I could see if it's just not your style, if you're just not into puzzle games or something. But I think if you have an appreciation for like the genre and kind of where it resides on the spectrum of video game types. I can't imagine you not really enjoying it on some level, like I said, unless it's just a more fundamental thing of like, unless I'm, I like first-person shooters and that's all I like, so I didn't like this,
Right.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. I feel like that totally would see that as well. Okay, so that's the last of what we've got about Obra Dinn itself. I did want to give some time to talk with you guys both about more about do you want to continue and just hear more about your show and, get some recommendations for people. I know one thing you said too is you guys covered this, I think, like a year ago on your show around then. So I think that if you want more Obra Dinn, definitely check out.
If you want to hear us regurgitate the same sound bites in which we...
Much like this game, you could hear the same talking points, but in a different order.
In a different order, yes.
There's no way that I haven't said, like, at least a dozen of the things, like, with the exact same cadence, So,
that's plagiarizing himself again.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, like what? Like a pure asshole. Like, well, I'm paraphrasing myself here.
Yeah. A smarter man than me once said the exact same thing. That smarter man being me.
Oh, that's incredible. Okay, so do you want to continue though? So I guess you did give a little bit of a pitch about what the show is already. So I was thinking you've gotten to cover a lot of games. I think you guys are getting close to 100, aren't you? You're around 90s?
Yeah, we just published episode 90. We're 10 away, so we have a special event which I shan't give away for our 100th episode, but it's going to be a. I feel like it might be the last podcast. I think this is where it comes to a head.
That's. I don't think you're allowed to go beyond that without changing up the format.
As far as I know, the rules are 100.
Yeah, then you're done.
They cut you off. But you've gotten to play a lot of games though. So what have been some of your favorite ones you guys have gotten to cover along the way so far?
Oof. Well, I mean, in terms of, there's a difference between, let's say my favorite games versus what I think are probably the better episodes. Those things don't necessarily correlate, right?
Yeah, I love the Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. Maybe my favorite game of all time. I wouldn't say start with that one.
I mean, we're a little rougher in the beginning, let's say. I think I like our Last of Us episode. I like our Gone Home episode. Those are a couple that stand out to me. I think, we'll see if people agree.
Yeah, we also do, I think we're like 75% me and John, but then we do bring guests on with some frequency, and that tends to be kind of a fun roundtable. We did one recently on the game Inside, which was brought to us by a friend, and John and I, we didn't really know much about it, and we listened to it, and it was great.
It was his recommendation.
Yeah, it was our friend's recommendation, and you'll get to listen to us talk to a noted television cinematographer about video games.
A name-dropping one.
Yeah, and not at all acknowledge what he does, and I'm sure many podcasts would be happy to talk to him about, like, shooting things more like, so what do you think about this fucking video game, brah?
Yeah, I mean, we are kind of sort of based out of LA. That's probably the most LA episode that I think we've ever done.
Yeah, if you want to like curl up just with douchebags.
Yeah.
But in terms of like, I think what we actually do, analyzing and enjoying and just sort of breaking these games down. I think our Spec Ops: The Line episode.
That's a tough one for me to listen to, but that was a tough game for me to play. But
but if you haven't played Spec Ops: The Line, it's gotten a lot of traction in the last handful of years as one of those quote unquote greatest games of all time. RD blah blah blah. It's a very fascinating, interesting game.
You'll hate yourself, but
you will hate yourself. But I really enjoyed our conversation about that, so I would send people maybe that way.
Or Ted has a recommendation that I like, which is that, like, look, if we've played a game that and you like, and we did an episode on it, look at that one.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it.
I mean, you're rolling the dice, but
Yeah, and we also tend to do a fun Spooktober in which we try to cover 4 or 5 games horror related for all of October.
Yeah, that's always quite the marathon.
And man, if you want to hear us do some bad sketches, that's when the time comes, because we try to do a little improv together.
I liked I don't know if it was in a Spooktober, but it probably was when you guys did Until Dawn with some of your friends. That was great.
Oh yeah, man,
those are really fun.
That one was a tough one to record, just in terms of keeping everybody on topic. But yeah.
Yeah, John yelled at us like a school teacher.
Well, when our one friend wanted to go through list of actresses and I don't know, just but like name drop how he knew everybody from something else, it was like, okay, Jesus.
That was one of the, like, we're a pretty like sober recording enterprise. I listen to some like hangout podcasts and I'm like, Jesus, guys, like less beers, but like I had a couple beers.
Well, I mean, and I've certainly been guilty of that.
On that one, So
I don't think we come across as a sober podcast, but
I disagree. I'm sober as a judge. Please don't slander me on mic.
Fair enough. Well, no comment.
No, that's great. But yeah, I think the advice you gave too, of if there's games that you've played before that you want to hear thoughts on, jump into those. At this point, having so many episodes, there are probably many games that people have played and would want to hear things on. So, go definitely take a look at the feed.
Have you covered Spec Ops: The Line, Dan?
I have not. I bought it for PS3 like a while ago, but then my PS3 started getting wonky. So I want to play it though, because like you said, that kind of renown of like, it's such a heavy game and all of that stuff.
Oh yes.
Yeah, and I think the format of your show would work really well for it. And if you have whatever the PlayStation streaming services,
I can't remember PlayStation. I forget what is it now? Not PlayStation Now or PlayStation Plus.
It's
but
on there.
It is available through streaming on.
Oh, really? Okay,
one of those,
or
at least it was.
Yeah, that'd be my recommend. I think you'd get some traction from playing that, some discussion.
No, I should look into that. I didn't know it was on one of those.
Yeah, just don't be prepared to have fun.
And don't if you don't know much about it, don't look anything up and don't listen to our episode about it.
I will stay away until I play it.
Yeah, cool.
But no, that's awesome. It sounds like my kind of game for sure. Of what it brings, it sounds pretty great.
I mean,
in
it's
terms
one
of what it is, like art, not how you're gonna feel about it, but.
And I don't know what the difficulty settings are, but it's one of those things where if you find yourself getting kind of bored with the gameplay or not, I would be like, yeah, just that's a game that just do it on easy and get the experience of the story, and you'll that's what the game is. It's not like. It's not a game you play for challenge or...
See, I feel like you should play it at, like, normal, just because, like, the notion of playing it as an actual video game is then indicting you for playing it, so I kind of like that.
That's
it's
awesome.
definitely one of those where it's like, you don't come out of there feeling like a good person.
Yeah, you shouldn't play video games.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, that's great. And I guess with that, so you've talked about some of your favorites that you've gotten to do. Are there any games that you've done more recently or ones that are coming up that you're especially excited about that you'd want to share?
Well, like I said, we're going to do Planescape Torment in the near future, so...
I mean, yeah, I haven't even started it, so I don't... I'm excited to play it. I mean, we're a little too fly by the seat of the pants to give you a lot of previews of what's coming up. But recently... I'm trying to... It's like, what do we do again?
Well, we covered Shadows of the Empire, which was quite fun, going back to the N64, which I hadn't played that in forever. So it was an interesting one to go back to. And
we try to do a balance, I think, of both modern games, indie games, and also kind of and retro games. I think that's kind of the triangulation we're trying to strive for.
We played Portal recently, which was like just a treasure to go back to.
Yeah. But yeah, as far as good episodes, I don't know. They're still the latest ones. They're still too fresh for me to even be able to judge.
Well, we're about to cover one that I am not happy with.
Yeah.
So,
preview the next episode. Ted will hate the game.
Yeah, it's called. It's a modern game that just came out called Triangle Strategy, and it is Stealing Valor.
Jeez. It turned out to be a lot longer than I thought it would be.
Not for me.
Yeah. Ted managed to put it down. I refused.
Oh yeah, no, I tapped out because it is not worth my time.
So anyway, if you're a Square Enix fan, look out for Triangle.
No, that's great. I'm also actually the same way. I definitely am more fly by the seat too as games are coming up. It's like I have ideas of what I want to do in the future, but if that future is this month or the next one, we'll see. Kind of that balancing. How many games you're playing and all that stuff too. So
there was a point where we were more organized, and then COVID hit, and then suddenly it became much more. We'll squeeze out what content we can.
I feel organized. I feel professional.
I mean, Ted was definitely the one. We released do episodes every 2 weeks, and that's definitely Ted's schedule and format. So that's why it's like, okay, a 2-hour journey, sure, let's just throw that in there. Get that one out of the way.
Yeah. It's crucial.
Short games are the lifeblood of being able to have a podcast for sure. You need
indeed.
some good short games to split in there to,
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah, make your life doable.
Yeah, and if a game is 5 hours or under, full letter grade for me. Like, just games are too long. Yeah, all your games are too long.
I threw that back at you, right, for like something where you were like, it's a C, and I was like, Ted, you said full letter grade. Okay, it's a B.
Yeah. Of course, this is the guy who's logged like 185 hours in Elden Ring, so
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, cool. I guess kind of last question. We did talk a little bit about it at the beginning, but where can people find you online?
Yes, you can just search for us on iTunes or any podcaster at Do You Want to Continue. You will see two 16-bit versions of John and I, one who looks like he's about to solve a mystery and the other who looks like he's about to kill the other one.
We'll leave it to you to determine who's who.
Who is who.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise we're also, we're on Instagram, Twitter, just look up Do You Want to Continue? I don't remember the exact handles.
Yeah, you can interact with John on Instagram or on Twitter at Do You Want to Continue? And if you want to send us an email, doyouwanttocontinue@gmail.com, and that would be me. Otherwise, I hide from the internet. John is the poor soul who has to do all of the interacting.
Awesome. No, that's great. And
I wish I had more to say.
Also, link all your stuff too inside the show notes. So if people are listening, definitely jump over there, listen to their stuff, follow them online, see all their things there. I guess that kind of comes to our close. So thank you both again for coming on. I'm really glad we got to talk about this game together.
Thanks for having us, Dan. This was a blast.
Yeah, I appreciate the invitation. It was a lot of fun doing this, and love your show and everything. I assume that anybody who's listening to this already knows, but nonetheless, I highly recommend that you continue listening to more episodes.
Yep, yeah. And I'm sorry that we hijacked the show for 90 minutes.
I know. This was a joy. I'm really glad that we got to share this game. This was a lot of fun.
Really, me too.
And yeah, as I've been saying along the way, really go listen to more of John and Ted. I've very much so enjoyed just picking out games that I've played before and seeing what they thought, and just getting new takes, new views, new things that I hadn't considered is really cool. So, if you want to get in contact with us, you can. Our website's TheGreatestStoryEverPlayed.com. There we've got a backlog of all of our episodes. We also have a Twitter at StoryEverPod. Yeah, you can talk to us there. We're on iTunes and everywhere else you get podcasts. If you'd like to support the show financially, you can at patreon.com/TheGreatestStoryEverPlayed. There, for as little as $1 per month, you can get access to monthly bonus episodes we do about things that are gaming related or not. So we've talked about like our favorite games from childhood or our favorite Pokemon or things like that. So if that interests you, check that out. And if you want to support the show but can't financially, that's cool. If you'd want to leave us a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you get podcast, that would help a lot. Just getting more people to share in these games together would be awesome. And that is the episode, and we will see you next time.